doing tonight.
Okay.
I have been very pleased to see that people are using the Tree of Life spiral and also the post-it board to discuss what you're going to bring into the future of Jewish renewal. It's really nice to see people doing that, and I love to see the roving reporters. They're doing an amazing job. Tivona, did I forget anything?
Only if you, those of you who are eating downstairs, if you would just leave all of your dishes there for ushering purposes.
Okay,
Don't,
perfect.
Once you eat, don't take them somewhere else.
Okay,
Leave them in the room.
thank you.
Something that didn't make it on the description of our workshops is the movement midrash that we'll do tonight following David Ingber's presentation. So the sad thing is that there's no talent show.
Yeah.
Oh, drives us all crazy this year. So it makes you want to come back next year when we promise to have it again. But this year, I promise. Okay, so instead, we will have we're going to move our bodies and welcome in Parshat Yitro in a different kind of a way. So please, after we finish David Ingber's piece, starting about 9 o'clock, we will enter Sinai like that. So it is my distinct pleasure to be able to introduce this plenary. There's a voyeuristic impulse amongst all of us. I know, it's there, right? And the voyeurism is, what were those senior thesis topics and what did people write for their smicha project, right? Because they've never been available. And it's been something that I know that Reb Daniel has been trying to work on for many, many years to make our work available to each other. So this is the Shehecheyanu moment of hearing what our Chevra have been working on. And it's very, very exciting to begin to share that. So Rabbi Daniel Siegel was my entrance back into Judaism when he was at Dartmouth, and I honor he and Chana Teferet for that. He's the first person to have received smicha from Reb Zalman and has been instrumental in the evolution of Jewish renewal. He was the rabbinic director of Aleph and currently serves as the director of spiritual resources, associate dean of the ordination programs, and if that's not enough, the chair of the rabbinic studies section of the program. I wonder when Reb Daniel sleeps. Never. He is the editor of Aleph's Siddur Kol Koreh project and numerous teachings of Reb Zalman's, as well as the author of several articles, including Moon, White Sliver of Shekhinah's Return, an essay on covenantal naming ceremonies for girls. Reb Daniel, please join us.
And last but not least, I am the rabbinic director of Aleph Alliance for Jewish Renewal in Canada.
Yeah.
That's right.
We actually move it closer, I think.
But then I said something to tell that. Okay. So Vihi Noam Adonai Eloheinu Aleinu, U'Maaseh Yadeinu Konena Aleinu, U'Maaseh Yadeinu Koneneinu. May God's beauty rest upon us. May our Maaseh Yadeinu, how was it? I lost the name. No, the verb before that. Yehi Noam Adonai Aleinu, U'Maaseh Yadeinu Konena Aleinu, right? And may God establish what we do, make it right. And then, as Rabbi Berg translated so many years ago, U'Maaseh Yadeinu Konenehu, may the works of our hands bring God visibly into this world, which someone in my past said is a meditation before doing anything. So, Vihi Noam Adonai Adonai a really profound, succinct, poetic sounding teaching, you can rest assured that it came from her. She translates my prose into poetry for me. So as Click and Clack say, from the Shameless Commerce Department, I just would like to let you all know two things. One of them is that about roughly every 2 weeks, I do produce a little blog. The blog is not about how I brushed my teeth that morning, but it's usually about what I'm working on. And most of the time, yeah, well, I don't have too many. But it's mostly about what I'm working on. So it's my way of sharing with you work in progress. And so please, don't hesitate to take advantage of it. Anyway, I'm putting that out to you because...
Please send the URL at the next mailing from Ohalah.
Okay, I'll put it on the Ohalah list. Again, all right, I was planning on, thank you. Thank you for saying that instead of me having to say it. Because I'm still not very good at self-promotion. And also, a couple of years ago, I guess, we did convene a little continuing ed class, which was the first half of the integral halacha class that I give to senior students each year. I'm open to doing something like that again if people would like.
Yes.
I've also received a request from Gordy to study halacha, and someone else spoke to me. I'm sorry, I can't remember. But if people are interested in that kind of thing, Gordy's agreed to receive your names, and we'll see what we can set up. Okay. Shameless Commerce Division is closed. So last year, I said in my introduction to the first of these sessions that we needed to re-expand the halachic table. For those of you who have listened to Ethan Tucker's fabulous first lecture called Core Issues in Halacha, he talks about that in the sense how a decision was made regretfully in many ways by the Orthodox rabbinate in late 19th century Germany to withdraw from the larger Jewish community, which was at that time kind of more controlled by the reformers, and take their share of the money that would come from the government, and they formed their own Orthodox chevra, as it were, association. And in so doing, it was like, my image is that they sort of took the leaves out of the table and put the extra seats against the wall and said, nobody else wants to be here anyway, so we will just do halacha for the people who are already committed to our way of living. And one of the ways in which he expressed that, which was really interesting, is that there's a tshuva of Rav Moshe Feinstein's that he cites, in which Rav Moshe says, I don't really understand this question. I don't know where it's coming from, but I will do the best I can to respond. Because that question came from just outside that realm. So last year I said that one of the things that we need to do is to put the leaves back in that table, bring those chairs back up and sit down, right? And join the conversation. So one of my favorite examples of that from us is that the very first tshuva that was written by, and I am having trouble getting names from my inner head to my mouth, but you know who I mean. Our Israeli male, Eyal Levinson. I said to him, write a halachic piece that legitimizes same-sex marriages. Yeah. And he said, no, it can't be done. And I said, well, if it can't be done, then halacha is totally useless. Why? It doesn't deal with the questions of our time. So he said, okay, I'll try. So I gave him Eliezer Berkowitz's book, Not in Heaven. He read that, wrote a beautiful paper, which I edited and is available from the Aleph catalog. And he took that and showed it to an Orthodox rabbi friend of his. And his friend read it and said, well, you didn't change my mind, but it's an interesting piece. And I said, that's about where I thought we could go with that. You see, so it's inside the conversation that people take. It's a recognizable document in that level. And so, what I wanted to start with today was the other question, which is, but why should we bother doing this? Right? Some people often ask me that. Why bother with this halakhic conversation? What's the point of it? Why don't we just say this is what's right and this is what we're going to do? Why isn't that enough? So I'm going to attempt a response to that, and I'm going to attempt that response by beginning with a little story that actually happened just moment that happened to me not too long ago. I was standing in our guest bedroom, and in our guest bedroom we have bookshelves. You know, have to have bookshelves almost everywhere in the house. And so in there was a 2-volume Siddur called, I think it was called Otzar HaTfilot, is that right? I don't remember. Yeah, I think it's called Otzar HaTfilot. And no, the reason is,
That's the one I was looking for.
that's right, I know, that's why I'm looking at you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at you. So I'm looking at this and I say, oh, what nusach is this Otzar HaTfilot? And I look at it, it's Ashkenaz. And then I think, you know, good God, a 2-volume set of a Siddur must be loaded with commentary, and I will probably never open it. And then I thought, how many other Ashkenazi, Nusach Ashkenaz Siddurim are there with commentaries that I will never see? Because I tend to look more in Nusach Sfard and Nusach Sfaradi, those places now for commentary. So I look in those. But how many of those Siddurim are there that I've never heard of and don't know about and will never open? Now the interesting part of that story was maybe 3 days after that there's an email from Chaya on the list saying, does anybody have Otzar HaTfilot? Because I'm looking for something. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to open it. So I wrote back and said, I have it. She said, well, I already got it. So, but I came close. But then that thought expanded. And I thought, you know, like, I learned when I was trying to do a doctorate one time, I learned that, you know, the Kabbalistic literature that we tend to be, that we gravitate to, which is the Kabbalah of the Sfirot, right, is smaller in volume than the Kabbalah of Tamei HaMitzvot. This Kabbalah is way bigger in volume, just in volume, you know, than the Sephirotic Kabbalah. I have yet to really begin to explore it, except in the places where, as Rebellia told me, there's an overlap, you know, where you're really doing both at the same time. But it's a whole part of the Kabbalah that I would love to dip into, and may never get a chance to do. And then I thought, well, that's also true of the halachic literature. The codes literature in volume is probably significantly smaller than the tshuva literature, right? Than the questions, the records of all of the questions that congregational rabbis ask their rabbis, right? Which is something I always try to get across. We don't have to be experts in everything. That's why we have people who, you know, who used to be in congregational work, who aren't anymore, and have some time so that you can say, you know, I got it this far, would you look it over and see? You know, tell me what you think. And that's what this literature is. It's so often in this tshuva literature that the responding rabbi will say something like, I received your letter, but I was at the spot. I didn't have all my books with me, but here's the best I can do. Or he'll say, you know, I was a little sick, and I've tried, and I'm sorry for the delay. I'm going to try my best. Right? And a lot of that just means, understand, don't take what I'm saying as exhaustive. Don't take what I'm saying as ultimate and authoritative. But if it helps you, I hope it will. Right? I remember one tshuva that I read where the rabbi, who I know was very right-wing, came down and said, yes, Rabbi, you're right, we should not do this here, and every rabbi will have to make his, of course in those days, his own decision in his own community. Which is to say, I don't know whether this is really something that belongs out there for everybody, but I think in your case, yes, I support what you did, and, you know, and here's why. So I realized that this conversation is enormous, and the whole point of it is, it doesn't really matter, in the end, really matter what the answer is. You know, the question, what's the halacha on, is really almost tangential to the real concept of the process, right? Which is to say, you know, how do we evaluate the relationship between the principles and the precedents of the past in relation to this specific moment? And every so often somebody comes and says, well, let me see if I can pull it together and see what the consensus is. I understand the Shulchan Aruch was actually composed that way. He said, well, I'll take this posek and this posek and this posek and this, and I'll look for the majority opinion, and that's what will go into the Shulchan Aruch. Very data-driven. You should read Nate Silver's book called The Signal and the Noise to understand the limitations of being data-driven, right? Among many other wonderful things he says, very provocative things he says in that book. So, you see, so the most important thing really is to be aware of the situation and to do the best we can, right? And participate in the conversation. Right? The way I tend to say it is something like this. The halachic conversation is about this underlying question, which is always the generic question underneath. How do I respond to this moment? Or how do I perform this action in such a way that it is connected to the revelation of our purpose at Sinai and contributes to the process of our redemption in the future? How do I take that detail,
Could
right?
you repeat that, please?
I will try. How do we, I will do the best I can, thank you. How do we take this moment in time, or this particular action, which I have to decide how to do, and how do I connect that to the revelation of our purpose, which happened at Sinai, and the process which we expect to end in our redemption at some time in the future when Mashiach comes? How do I do that? See, that's what it means I went to the Rebbe to see how he ties his shoelaces. Because when the Rebbe ties his shoelaces, I see Sinai and I see Mashiach. With the consciousness, right? Why do people care which side they button their jackets? You know, it's not just to be different, but really in the heart of it is, what do I have to do as a Jew to mark myself so that I stay connected, so that I don't confuse myself with people I don't want to be confused with? How do I do it in such a way that I'm a beacon to those people to move them forward? There is, I think it was the Rambam's son who said, you know, that it says, you know, it says in Devarim that people will say, who is this wonderful people that has God so close to them? And so you are obligated to practice your Judaism in order to evoke that response. Not, look at those weird people, right? See? So for example, I remember a scene that happened in Brooklyn where, you know, African-American women thought that Hasidic men were racist because they wouldn't shake their hands. See? So how do you balance the question of my desire to be modest and respectful of another person's body, right, and not have that person think that I'm coming on to them, with the notion that a person needs some sign of recognition, and in our culture that's a handshake. So that's, you see, that's a halachic question. How do I do that? I want to cite, because I think here's another way of saying it, which I love very much, and it comes with her permission from Hannah Dresner's tshuva from this year. She says, "We are lovers, and our pillow talk, the language of our love, is our exchange of Torah. God speaks the written word to us, and we return the flow of God's love by listening and answering empathically as any lover would. We offer pilpul, extrapolations of Jewish law, what we call oral Torah, as we try to construe how best to integrate what our lover is saying, how best to demonstrate our interest, building in our response on the sentiments our lover has shared." And what binds us together as Jews is not the conclusions we come to, but the process of sharing our understandings of halacha and our sacred texts. So the next question is, what's the worldview that underlies that? And maybe that will be for another time. So again, a reminder before we move. This is a wonderful moment, and I'm so grateful to the program committee for allowing it to come into being. We have, for a long time, I have felt that the writings of most or many of the students are extraordinary pieces of contemporary halacha, using the principles of our time, understanding that we are living through in a paradigm, understanding that we have to do for halacha what Rabbi Akiva did for halacha many years ago. Rabbi Akiva is the one who said, in order for halacha to be relevant, we have to have a new way of pulling meaning out of the Torah. So we can do the little, every letter can be used, right, to hang halachot on. That's what that wonderful, extraordinary midrash is. When Moshe Rabbeinu goes to the back of Rabbi Akiva's yeshiva and he can't understand anything that's happening. You see? Because that was a paradigm shift moment, and Rabbi Akiva is putting into that a new way. The 13 principles of Rabbi Yishmael are not enough anymore. So there has to be another way. And now, as Reb Zalman has suggested to us also, whether we call it cycle halacha as we used to, or integral halacha as we tend to now, that we need this new concept in order to expand the halachic conversation so that we can be both backwards compatible and forward-looking at the same time. Right? So that's what we do. And so what I insist of each student is not that they pontificate on some global level about whether this is possible, but to construct a question, most often out of something in their own lives. To construct a question which is, how do I respond to this particular situation, in this particular moment, in a way which connects me to both ends of the continuum that we see ourselves on. And so we have today the first three. There'll be a number of others. I'm working right now on a booklet that I promised Reb Zalman some years ago to talk about the question of conversion. And, do we need to stay in the bipolarity of you're either a non-Jew or a Jew? Or do we have to then also stay in the polarity of do we do conversions light or do we do conversions heavy? Is there another option? So this will be coming out and will include several of tshuvot that have been written over the last few years by our students and our rabbis. Today we'll hear the first of those from Reb Jeremy. And two more, which are on different themes, one on burial, one on end of life, quality of life, end of life issues. That will be another major theme that we'll have. And hopefully over the next while, I now have a team of people who are willing to do editing. We will begin to get these out. And so it is my joy, my privilege, my honor to ask the three people, Ephraim Eisen and Jeremy Carnes and Simcha Zevit, to come on up, to take their seats at the table, to share with you some of what they did, and then to discuss that with you afterwards. Thank you so much. Just asked to remind you again, I said it, but I don't think I said it clearly enough. After they each do their short presentation of what they did, we will break up into three groups. You could go to the one that you would like to pursue the conversation with and do your best, to keep the conversations on that level of, is this situation that I know similar to this or not? And how similar and how different? Okay.
Ladies first.
They're still chivalry.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I want to dedicate what I'm going to share with you today to my mother, Elaine Schneider, Esther Bat Shmuel Shoshana. She died on March 12th of 2013. And she was a wonderful mother. She had great love for her family. She was a woman of graciousness and humor, and she's deeply missed.
Excuse me, could you move your mouth closer to the mic? We're having trouble hearing you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Better?
Yeah.
Good?
Okay, good.
Okay. So as Reb Daniel said, in writing our Shuvot, we were asked to focus on a very specific question. And it could be one that we were confronted with personally, or that we could imagine a congregant or someone we served coming to us to discuss, either seeking an answer, Rabbi, what should I do? Or much more likely in our circles for permission or for an affirmation that a decision they were making had its place within the context of Jewish law or tradition. So I want to begin by expanding on what Reb Daniel was, how you were describing integral halacha. It'll just kind of help me ground in how I went through this process. A metaphor that Reb Zalman uses to explain paradigm shift is that just as in our capacity to see our place in the universe broadened and shifted in 1968, once we were able to see the whole Earth from the perspective of a spaceship, we need to see Judaism and its practice in a way that includes the widest lens of understanding, not only what we can see through the ancient texts. So we look to the teachings of Torah and Talmud, halachic codes, and more current halachic works. And we include current societal norms, scientific knowledge, and so on to redefine a contemporary Judaism that's doable for Jews who wish to stay both true to our tradition and allow for it to be reinterpreted for our time, as Rev. Daniel said. Integral halacha takes this paradigm shift, this wide-angle lens, into account. And furthermore, it's based on an understanding of divine will, the ultimate purpose of halacha. That's not only defined by an outer authority. God's will is revealed through texts and tradition, but also revealed through our personal understandings and experiences. In the old paradigm, we said the foundation of halacha was rooted in a transcendent God, a God primarily outside of ourselves. God who lives in the heavens descended onto Sinai and gave us Torah. And from then on, it's been our obligation to live up to its expectation of us. That's a quote from Integral Halacha, Rev. Zalman, in Rev. Daniel's book. Now the paradigm shift includes an emphasis on the inner experience of God. And we look to manifest our understanding of what's required of us through our actions in connection to our understanding of tradition. This doesn't mean, though, that each person operates on his or her own, doing whatever they feel is right and calling it halacha, the Jewish way. Judaism always has been, and I think always will be, a religion that's rooted in strong community. If we're undergoing a shift that allows personal experience and understanding to be a basis for decision-making, how then do we move to communal norms? And I love Rev. Zalman's teaching about the consensus of the committed. It's such a great phrase. This describes an added dimension to the halachic decision-making process in the new paradigm. We establish communal norms both by learning traditional Jewish answers to vexing questions and also by searching our own hearts and our own souls to find where God and our highest values lead. And we recognize our tradition allows for more than one choice. And I believe we want to cast the widest possible net, grounded in our tradition, for Jews to find comfort, wisdom, guidance, and acceptance for their choices, for them to be affirmed in their authenticity as Jews, so that we can all be part of, with certain parameters, and not outside of the religious and spiritual lineage that we all inherit. So to set the context for my question in my tshuva about artificial nutrition and hydration at the end of life. Advances in medical technology within the last several decades, which allow us to prolong life, raise essential questions that have not been asked until the last few decades. Our ability to prolong life with nutrition and hydration given through either tubes inserted through the nose or directly into the abdomen for those who can no longer swallow, with respirators for those who can no longer breathe, and so on, has us asking questions as monumental as how